How's it going, everybody? Okay, today we are going to be talking about something a little bit different. I was teaching this week Legal Update 1 and 2 to some agents, and there's a whole portion in there about the difference between the seller's disclosures from TREC as well as the seller's disclosure from uh, Texas Realtors. So there's a huge difference between the two and how they work. And so I just want to be going through and making sure. Now I'm on the live screen, but it's not showing live. Am I? Nope, never mind. It's there. We're good. All right. So I just wanted to make sure everybody could see what we were doing, and the noise and stuff. It's always freaks me out a little bit. So what we're going to be going over today, guys, is the difference between the seller's disclosure of the Texas Real Estate Commission as well as the seller's disclosure of Texas Realtors. This is a huge conversation in the legal update course, which most people have already taken or in the process of taking to renew your license to become a Texas real estate agent. Everyone has to take it, no matter who you are, what you are. You have to take legal updates 1 and 2, as well as a contracts course was required for every single person taking the classes. So we're going to be going through the two different things because it brought up a lot of conversation while I was teaching the course, and it made some good points. So I want to go through. I'm going to be sharing my screen now, making sure people can see kind of the differences between the two forms, because believe it or not, the Texas Real Estate Commission or TREC form is much more simple. It's much more basic, and it almost mirrors the Texas statute of what needs to be there and how it needs to work. So I'm going to be sharing my screen now. I think I forgot to do that earlier when I yelled I was going to do it. Entire screen. So we're going to do it there. I need to show there. So I'm going to be going over here to my dot loop, which is where I have them. And it took me so long I logged out. So what we've got is I'm going to have 3 different forms I'm going to be showing you guys. But first, we're going to go over the Texas Realtors or the TREC form, because I think the TREC form really does. It's the form that obviously TREC is going to say that you should use, because it's the form that's going to have the least amount of opportunities to make a mistake. The Texas Realtors form is very robust, does some magical things. It does a lot of great things, but it also has a lot of upgrades that you need to do. And we'll talk a little bit about a pending lawsuit that's right now in the Texas Supreme Court about, was there too much information, and because there's so much information, was some of it not given? And that kind of is a terrifying thing that we need to discuss. So we'll look at the TREC form now. It's a much smaller form, which is kind of another reason that a lot of people want to use it and make it work. So the first section is just, you're always going to have the concerning section. This notice is a disclosure of seller's knowledge of the condition of the property as the date signed by seller. It's not a substitute of any inspections or warranties the purchaser may wish to obtain. And it's not a warranty. The seller is or is not occupying the home. Now you just put a yes, no, or unknown, a Y, an N, or a U next to every single thing that the property has. So the first page, you're just going to go through and say, does it have cable TV wirings, attic fan, septic system? Any of those sayings, yes, no, or unknown, you're going to put. So one whole page of this is pretty much just saying, I have this, I don't have this. I'm not going to ask of anything above, are there any known working issues that have defects or are not working or need repair? You're going to put yes or no, and then you're going to describe what's not working. So in the situation, if you have pool equipment and you know that the pool heater is not working, you would put pool heater does not work or something to that effect, so it's known. Then we're going to be talking about the property have working smoke detectors in that section. Now what's weird about the TREC form that is not on the Texas Realtors form, there's this whole asterisk about Chapter 766 of the Health and Safety Code, where it's discussing if the purchaser is hearing impaired. And if the purchaser is hearing impaired, they can require the seller to install hearing impaired smoke alarms in certain parts of the home. It has to be done as long as, 1, the buyer or member of the buyer's family who will reside at the dwelling is hearing impaired. The buyer gives the seller written evidence of the hearing impairment from a licensed physician, and within 10 days after the effective date, the buyer makes a written request for the seller to install smoke detectors for the hearing impaired and specifies locations for installation. Parties may agree who will bear the cost of installing the smoke detectors and which brand the smoke detectors to install. I've not used this phone as much. I use the Texas Realtors forms more just because it's kind of one of those things where it became a habit. So this was kind of an interesting thing to read and discuss and think about, where there's a whole conversation just about hearing impairedness for smoke detectors in the seller's disclosure that they may have to be upgraded and changed. Again, then paragraph 3, we're talking about, are you aware of any known defects in any of the following: walls, interior walls, exterior walls, roof, fences, plumbing, ceiling doors, all those things. And if the answer to yes to any of those, you would have to put it in. There's always giving you an option to add additional sheets if it is required. So you don't have to put it all in the 1 to 2 lines that is available. Are you aware of any of the following conditions? Right, yes. If why of yes, no, and of no. Active termites, improper drainage, all these things. So it's a much less information that is being asked about on the TREC form than is asked about on the Texas Realtors form. So it's a huge difference in forms. And because there's such a difference in forms, sometimes when you get the form that you're not used to, it kind of freaks out agents a little bit. But you are allowed to use either form. There's something that's required. And what's kind of recommended to in the legal update is to offer both forms to the seller and say, which one of these do you want to complete, and give them that opportunity to say which one they want to use. If the answer to any of the following is yes, explain below. Are you aware of any equipment or system in the property that is in need of repair? Yes or no. Are you seller aware of any of the following conditions? Right, yes if the answer is yes, or no if the answer is no. Present flooding insurance coverage, previous flooding due to a failure. So there's a requirement in there about flooding, and both the Texas Realtors form as well as the TREC form has this section in here. But as you see, the flooding in the TREC form is not as robust as it will be in the Texas Realtors form when we look at it in a little bit. It's going to have the same information because it's now required about what the flooding requirements are, what you can do, and where you can go to get that information with the flood maps and things. Have you ever filed a claim of flood damage to the property? If yes, you have to explain when. Homes in flood zones with mortgages with federally related or insured lenders are required to have flood insurance. So we're warning people of that information now. Have you received assistance from FEMA and the Small Business Administration SBA loan for flood damage? Filling that information out. Are you the seller aware of the following? Right, yes or no. Room additions or structures modified without permits. So that a lot of the information is going to be similar about either form. Again, the TREC form just is going to much closer mirror what is required in the statute, where the Texas Realtors form is a little bit more robust and has a lot more things added to it. If the answer to any of the above is yes, explain. Again, always gives you opportunity to add more sheets. Is the property located in a coastal area in the Seaward of the Gulf? Some of Texas worries about that. Us in El Paso, pretty far from the Gulf, so it's not a huge thing for us in El Paso, but we definitely have areas that are near the intercoastal waterways. Property may be located near a military installation and may be affected by high noise or air installation compatible use zones or other operations. So having that information as well, and places for the seller to sign and for the purchaser to sign. So this is the TREC form. It's 4 pages. It has grown over the time, especially with the addition of the flood insurance requirements that went into effect about a year ago, but not all too difficult of a form. Now we're going to look at the Texas Realtors form, which is a little bit more in depth and shows definitely a lot more on that form. This form, as you can see from it's a lot more kind of in your face of yes, no. There's a lot more writing in there. It's kind of a little bit more terrifying to the or intimidating is a better word to the seller having to fill this form out. You know, asking similar questions. Are any of these in the property now? Yes, no, or are you for unknown? Additional features. Are they going to have these additional features as well? Will it be? Is it electric? Is it gas? A little bit more breakdown there. Underground lawn sprinklers, sewer systems. All this information is here. As you can see, it's just a lot more in-depth questions as well as kind of packed tightly in there to kind of give people a little question about how that's working and how it's going to play out. Are you aware of any items listed in section 1 that are not in working condition? Are you aware of any defects or malfunctions in any of the following? So all of those are there again: basements, ceilings, doors, driveways, electrical. So it's there. It's just kind of given in a different light and those things. Are you aware of any of the following conditions? Yes, no, or yes or no. Aluminum wiring, asbestos components, disease trees. All these questions will be on here, and you need to put yes or no. And if you no, could also mean you are not aware. So if you are aware of something and you say you're not, you can get in trouble. So be very careful about making sure when your clients are filling this out, they fill it out to the best of their knowledge and go with it. Now, the big differences you're going to see is we're talking about flood insurance. And when we're talking about flood insurance, the Texas Realtors has created a whole nother form. And if you put yes in any of these situations, you have to attach a TXR 1414 form. I'm going to guess majority of agents have skimmed this page and not done a very good job of actually reading it and don't have any clue of what the TXR 1414 form is. And I've never even read the TXR 1414 form. So we're going to go through and we're going to actually show you the TXR 1414 form, explain it, and then we're going to talk about a pending lawsuit that is out there on this due to this form and because of this what was used. So if answered any of the above, you have to explain, is it in a 500-year flood plan, 100-year flood plan, wholly, partially, how is that breaking down? Very similar to the other form, except in this form, you are required, according to the form, to include or attach the TXR 1414 form. Other than that, very similar. Have you filed a claim? Have you received assistance from FEMA? Very similar questions to the TREC form that is there. Are you aware of the following? It has much more information, more robust about homeowner association, fees, name of the association. Is it a monthly fee? Is it a mandatory? Is it voluntary? Are there any unpaid fees or assessments on the property? So a lot of this information is just going to give a lot more breakdown as far as courts. So this is a 6-page form compared to the TREC's 4-page form. And as you can see, they've used every inch of the 6 pages. So it is definitely a lot more intimidating for your client. And with all those additional questions, there's more chances to make a mistake or do something wrong. So I'm not saying which form is better. The Texas Real Estate Commission does say they recommend their form because there's less chance for making wrong things. The Texas Realtors form is a fantastic form. It does a very good job. But this form has to be filled out by a seller, and sellers can get very intimidated filling these out. What kind of tax exemptions do you currently have on your property? Have you ever filed a claim for flood damage? Have you ever received proceeds for claim of damage for property for any insurance claim? Does the property have working smoke detectors installed in accordance with the smoke alarms? Again, we're going to have the conversation in there about the hearing impaired, but again, we as realtors don't read very well, and so it's hidden down there on page 5. Sometimes people see it, sometimes they don't, and that conversation is there, needs to be there, but are we paying that close attention to the form when the clients ask the questions? Do we know where to look and how to find it? More information about Department of Safety as far as sex offender registries, properties located in coastal areas, the Seaward Gulf, that information is there as well as wanting who is the current provider of all of the utilities as well as their phone numbers. Just a lot more information there. The same military installation and Gulf conversations is from the TREC form. So this form, as you can see, uses every bit of its 6 pages, whereas the TREC form is only 4. Now we're going to go look at that other form, that 1414 form. It sounds really intimidating, but it is just a explanation. It's an information about special flood hazard areas. It explains flood areas. It explains availability of flood insurance, ground floor requirements for federal, state, and county and city regulations. It's just going to go through and do a complete and total explanation of what to worry about with flood and all those things. There is no breakdown that the seller is going to sign and fill out and say it has this, it does not have this. Now, the weird thing is it has a receipt acknowledged by. So there's a place for the buyer to sign. But the weird thing is there's nothing that demands that either the seller or the buyer fills out this form. And that is actually was discussed by the Texas Realtors in a flood hazard areas form, saying neither party is required to sign the information about special flood hazard area because the information form was attached to the signed disclosure. So if you send this along with the seller's disclosure, as you're required to do if it is required, and you can prove that you have sent it to the buyer, There's nothing that says it has to be signed. I would strongly recommend trying to get it signed and getting a copy back to prove that you did give it to them. They did receive it. They did see it. Both as an agent for the buyer or the seller, just covers your bases to make sure this form has been filled out and done if they have stated that they are in a flood zone insurance. Now, this is the only thing I'm going to bring up, and this is a really good job of explaining it. The fact that there are two forms, and there was, I was trying to remember what year it was. Back to it. There was a court case back in 2018 in Dallas where a buyer was filling out was purchasing a $1.5 million or $1.45 million property. The sellers used the Texas Realtors form, which includes and marked, yes, it does have flood insurance. Did not include the form 1414. The buyer's agent said, "Hey, you never sent me the form 1414. Can you send it to me?" It never got sent for whatever reason. Day before closing, the buyers canceled the deal, saying they're canceling it because they never received the form 1414. Became a huge deal. There was a lawsuit involved where the seller sued the buyer for non-payment or wanted them to continue with the sale. Went to court. Buyer had a judgment over, or seller had a judgment over $140,000 in legal fees because they said the form was there, you didn't include it. Went to appeals. Appellate court came back and said, overturned it, saying, listen, we don't understand. It's not required in the contract. It's not required in those things. That is not needs to be there. It has now gone to the Texas Supreme Court. The Supreme Court is looking at it and has not made the final decision. The scary thing is there is a second lawsuit against the agents that is on hold until this decision comes back and decides how it's going to play out. So be very careful. If you're required to send additional forms, make sure you do that. And number one, if someone calls you and says, send me something, you got to answer them. You got to send it to them. You got to do what needs to be done. So it's kind of a terrifying thing. These forms are there. We don't do a good job of reading them and understanding what they say when we give them to our clients, and that is a scary thing. So, I mean, how many times have people looked at this form and said, "There's a chance"? Oh, we got something as a seller. Just freaking disclose if there is something going on and pay for the service warranty. It is the same as insurance. Absolutely. I'm a firm believer. Disclose. I'd much rather say, hey. I don't know if this is going to be a big deal or not, but I want to make sure you know about it. It makes your life just a whole lot easier as long as you disclose what's wrong with it and how it's going to work. Now, when you're in the process of doing things, easier said than done sometimes. Sometimes people forget things. You know, we're in New Mexico. We're dealing with a form that they've created that says any adverse condition to a home, but included in that says anything that you made repairs on. And the question is, well, if I've repaired it, it's no longer an adverse issue. And how far back do we need to go? And what does this make sense? And it's one of those things where nobody really knows the answers. You know, I have to disclose if you're related to me, you know, above or below me. If you're my ninth cousin, I'm disclosing that you're my ninth cousin. I'd rather over disclose than under disclose. So that is definitely a thing that is there that needs to be discussed. I'm going to go ahead and take off my screen sharing at the moment and see. Is Brian, are you on the call yet, or thoughts on seller's disclosure? Which one do you?
Yeah. So I personally like the one that gives more information. I like the TR or TAR, whatever you want to call it. So at the end of the day, to me, that one feels like you're disclosing more, you're covering your butt. And I tell our clients that same thing. I also personally would tell everybody out there, if you are not using this program called Seller Shield, okay, this is a third party that doesn't charge anything to a real estate agent, does try to pitch a service that allows for legal recourse and legal protection if that person is to be sued in the future. It's an elective service. The client can elect to or not elect to take that service. But because they are able to have the client's information as a providing resource, they allow for an app-driven filling out of this seller's disclosure. Now, it covers all your bases because it also allows for If a person clicks one thing, for instance, what you were just talking about, flood insurance, then it opens up the second forms and kind of even runs that gamut for you. So what I would say is, guys, find ways to make yourself more proficient and efficient in process. Seller Shield to me is one of those things. Now, there is the ever once in a while that have very difficult time. Yeah, so Kent said Seller Shield is a must use. It is a massive use for us. I mean, we use it almost exclusively, except for those technologically improficient clients. And then, guys, sit them down and tell them, listen, I don't care when it happened, how it happened, what happened, whatever, disclose. Disclose when in doubt. Because, listen, the moment that that buyer pins that signature or that initial on that document, you haven't given up 100% liability of it, but you know what? You're protecting yourself because you've disclosed. Now, same conversation goes into disclosure. You know, Andrew, I think it'd be remiss for us not to bring up the fact that a lot of agents are currently using this as their option period. And you out there, agent-wise, you need to realize that if you're not sharing the disclosure, and we had this discussion a while back, if you're not sharing it and they have selected, even if they have it, if they select that they did not get it and they want it within 7 days, you have to reshare it, because otherwise the contract supersedes and the written contract supersedes, and they have now an option period. And if you never deliver it, they could cancel a contract at the closing date and they would be justified.
No, absolutely. And we've seen it done. The problem is it's really easy to forget your timelines. You know, everybody says it. Every class you go to, everything. Create a calendar. Put in that calendar when option ends, when earnest money has to be delivered, when all these steps need to be done, because the whirlwind gets in the way and life gets so difficult. You know, we talk about things. You know, in the seller's disclosure, it says very clearly, you have to disclose if it's a violent death. Well, if it's not a violent death, you don't have to disclose. And as someone says right here, the neighbors.
I put up a comment for that purpose. Yeah.
You know, when you've got a situation where someone died peacefully in the home and it doesn't have to be disclosed, I guarantee it's going to be disclosed. And if you think you're going to be able to get away with it, if you know someone's passed away, make your life a whole lot easier to say, hey, just so you know, someone's passed away in this home. I had a situation where we had a client, she wanted to buy a home. I told her, I was like, listen, ironically, I knew the home was actually belonged to a realtor who I knew had passed away of cancer. I called the husband who was a realtor as well, said, hey, did she die in the home? He's like, yes, she did. So I explained that to the buyer, said, hey, just so you know, she passed away, surrounded by family. I just want you to be aware of what's going on. She's like, can I go see the home again? I said, absolutely. We went to the home. She said she felt very comfortable. She knew there was a smooth passing. If she found out later that someone had died in the home and we hadn't, I don't know how she would have felt. And it's definitely one of those things. Even if you share the seller's disclosure.
I'm going to bring this one back up because
yeah.
If it is, and so I fought this battle and I lost. Even if it is shared, if you don't adjust the contract to state that they have received instead of they will receive, they have superseding effect. They will win that argument 100 out of 100. Now, granted, if you went to a jury of 12, maybe would side on your behalf, but then you've got to go to that process. Don't jeopardize. What we now have done is that we do share during the showing time, and what we do is adjust the contract to state that they have received it and they don't have that timeline.
And that's the real answer is when you're negotiating back and forth, even if you hadn't done it via showing time, which is a great tool and a great way to do it, send them the seller's disclosure with your counter offer back or an initial there has received. That way it takes away their opportunity to say they have not received it. We've crossed that out. They have received it. They got it back. And the problem is solved in that regard. It just makes your life so much easier. Seller's disclosures, guys, unfortunately, a lot of people ignore them. A lot of people don't pay attention to them. Don't give them the credit that they're due. And we need to make sure that we take care of the truth of what the seller's disclosure is. It is a true disclosure to the buyer, and the buyer wants it for a reason. You know, probably 8 out of 10 buyers are going to look at the seller's disclosure and never touch it and never read it and never care about it. But there is a buyer out there who's going to say, I want to know about this. Does it have aluminum wiring? The problem is a lot of sellers don't have the answers. They're not handy people. They don't know what kind of wiring they have. They don't know what kind of switches they have. They don't know these things. And it's a horrible task for them to be able to do it. And that's where Seller Shield does do a fantastic job of coming in, walking people through the process about how it works, what's the best opportunities. I'm not here to tell you which one is the best to use. My recommendation is going to be the same recommendation we get from the TREC legal update, and that is give both of them to your client and say which one do you want to use, because that way if something happens, they can't come back to you later and say, hey, I could have used a different form. Hey, you were given both forms. It's just like, what's the best home warranty? The one you choose. Here are all the ones that I know about. This is their pamphlets. You tell me which one you want to go with, and that's the one you go with. Don't try to answer the questions for the clients. It's not your home. You don't know what they're going to want. You know, if that buyer is really knowledgeable about what's going on in the home and what has to happen and what doesn't, and they don't get a seller's disclosure, they can get really frustrated very easily, and rightly so. They know what they're looking for. They know what they deserve. They know the rules. They know the laws. I didn't get this form, and I wanted it to check it against what knowledge I had. And that is the important thing out there. It is not a check the box, I did it. It is make sure it's correct, make sure they filled out all the forms that need to be filled out, and everything was done. That's pretty much all I've got. Brian, anything else you want to go over on this portion? Okay.
No, guys, just remember, at the end of the day, it all comes down to how are you going to be smart about it.
Exactly. And the best thing you can do, especially, you know, you got one or two deals, it's easy to remember. When you get 6, 7, 8, in Brian's case, 400, I don't know what he's up to right now, deals working at any one time, you can't keep track of this stuff in your head. Get it down, put it in a calendar, make sure you're doing something to make sure people know when it is, where it needs to be, how it needs to be, and just take care of your clients, because oops, I made a mistake is never the right answer and never what we need to do. So just, you know, in teaching this class that we had last week, I thought it was fantastic. I thought it gave us a great opportunity, making sure people will know what they need to do, and moving forward with that. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to reach out to Brian or I at any time, and we'll keep you up to date with another great class next week.
See you guys.
Appreciate it.